This feels like the calm before the storm, the same feeling I had before 3.1 before we had an unforgettable story quest. And I think I wanna talk about the Fractsidus and Hiyuki's importance going forward in Lahairoi even though the update is right at the doorstep. So let's dive in. I will talk about the Fractsidus first, but go to this timestamp if you only want to hear about Hiyuki. You see, what Fractsidus is trying to do and most likely have succeeded on the next patch is something they have been preparing for ever since the start of the game. Everything they had done, every experiment, every sacrifice and every play, all this was to actually sow the seed they planted in Lahairoi, LF1 and the Strider Gate. Under these grand showcases by Scar, Cristoforo or Florova in Jinjo and Rinascita, they have been actively trying to experiment and acquire confirmation on 3 of their research sample or theories. The confirmation of a second resonance awakening, the possibility of a Trenodian resonator actually existing, and whether or not is it possible to make an artificial Trenodian. These are important to what they want to achieve with LF1. The Grand Architect mentions he was in a long slumber until he decided to conveniently show up when Fractsidus' goals regarding these 3 theories and experiment was fulfilled. In Jinjo, their plans at the front line kind of failed, but they were happy enough after Jinshi's second awakening because that allowed them to proceed to Rinascita. This is where they proceed on to the next step, merging Mia and Leviathan and confirming the possibility of a Trenodian resonator's existence through Cartetia. So the Fractsidus' job was almost done after 2.4, but they kept wreaking havoc to assist Leviathan and taking some of its assimilation powers with them, which is now in the hands of Cristoforo, which will be used or has been used on altering Denia and a lot of other people in the process. That's why at the finale Grand Architect appears, cause the playtime is over, since now they have the confirmation that a second resonance awakening is possible, a Trenodian resonator can actually exist and making an artificial Trenodian is practically possible. They can finally proceed to Lahairoi to use the knowledge gained from these 3 situations on a lot of test subjects, out of which only Denia has appeared to be the most compatible one. There are more proofs that everything they have been doing is for their grand plan in Lahairoi. You see, the underground where Mia's experiment was held, the Fractsidus was actively sending the information of that ongoing experiment with Mia to their team in Lahairoi. We can see that in this text that mentions them sending the experiment data to a place that is frigid and technologically advanced, basically Lahairoi, which was our next destination. So the Fractsidus needed to know about the possibility of this before continuing with their main objective in Lahairoi, but you may ask, why Lahairoi out of all places? We know it's because of the LF1 and the Strider Gate, but from the looks of it, they went to control LF1 to an extent with the previously mentioned experiments. And we can say that for sure from this recent report, which says that there are outside influence on LF1 which is making the Trenodian act up in a different way recently. Also, and this is where Denia comes in. Denia not only went through a second resonance awakening, also became a Trenodian resonator successfully and has went through similar experiments like Mia. And remember the Leviathan's power that was with Cristoforo by the end of Rinascita? That was used to replicate a case similar to Cartetia. I mean, they already said that in the trailer, but this is like where they would insert a portion of LF1's power inside Denia. She is basically Mia but on steroids, the successful test subject of their experiments. But she wasn't the only one who was used as the test subjects. The new enemies with the weird body modifications are the creation of Fractsidus, which are now a defective failure, as they say. Their descriptions further hint these were one of the many failures of their experiments in Lahairoi, out of which Denia was the only one who succeeded. What really surprised me was how the Grand Architect still wouldn't think twice to discard her if she turns out to be not so useful, even though she checks all the boxes of what they want. I believe it has to do with the fact that they have already succeeded with the experiment once, so even if Denia doesn't help them anymore, they can still replicate her with someone else. After all, these guys have endless time. LF1 is their biggest bet now, not just because of its power but also the Strider Gate. You see, it's not only humans and the researchers that went to explore the outer space again. We also have a not so evil girl that wants to have a look beyond the stars. But if, as per Luke said, the person in the Court of Savannah space station was actually the Grand Architect, then the Grand Architect has already been to the space, so it's not just the space they are looking for, it's something more. And that's where the Strider Gate comes in. No one knows what's beyond it. The actual space lies past the etheric sea, but that's above the sky. Strider Gate is at the bottom of Lahairoi, and it most likely came into existence only after the Roya Frostlands became the new pole of Solaris after the first lament 10,000 years ago. This unknown mystery regarding the gate is what intrigues the Grand Architect. More and more actual truth about the universe, that's what they are looking for. I do think we are going to outer space exploration really soon. Maybe in like a year and a half, who knows. And about Hiyuki, with the conclusion of the new solar celebration, we learned that Hiyuki has been looking for I-Mate in the Void Matter Zone. We have a lot of information on her now, and the more I learn about her and Ashinohara, the more interesting it gets. Hiyuki is the strongest warrior in all of Ashinohara, and Ashinohara has more than just one sentinel. It caught me by surprise at first, but if we think about it, Huanglong also has 7 sentinels for 7 of their cities. And Ashinohara is an entire region which consists of many areas like Honami City, so we can assume they have multiple sentinels there, but maybe not anymore, as Luke mentions Ashinohara as a whole is largely destroyed now. These sentinels left behind 5 relics which are like talismans, and these talismans are sent to different factions inside Ashinohara for safekeeping. From the faction Hiyuki was at, she inherited one of the 5 talismans called Suzu from her sister and became a Miko that day. Suzu lets the user take power from their own future versions, the future that could have been possible someday but is now destroyed because she used that future for her current task. It basically drains her life force every time she uses it. It could be used for a fight but also for granting wishes, as we saw from the trailer. Hiyuki also has a title known as Flaming Sakura, and from this message by her sister it appears very clearly that every Miko that has used or inherited Suzu in the past was given the title of Flaming Sakura. These Flaming Sakura Mikos are obviously stronger than the average Mikos. Platia mentioned this before, but Ashinohara's defense against the Trenodian and Lament is handled by the Mikos, and among all the Mikos out there can only be one Flaming Sakura Miko at a time because, well, there is only one of the Suzu talisman. Just like Hiyuki's sister, every Miko of Flaming Sakura that had the possession of Suzu, all of them died because of one reason, and that is the excessive use of Suzu's power and being unable to control it. Only Hiyuki so far is able to control this well. There is also a very beautiful contradiction as to why every Miko that inherit this talisman is called the Flaming Sakura. Let's take Hiyuki for example. Her forte revolves around freezing the enemies and her surroundings, but the title is Flaming Sakura. It can be confusing to many, but it's clearly very symbolic in a bitter way. We know the Suzu talisman that she inherited lets her draw powers from future possibilities of herself. But this isn't without a risk because it drains her own lifespan every time she uses this power. Her ultimate voice line is,
"May the Sakura incinerate. Burn this self away."
Which is so fitting for her situation. To use Suzu, she has to permanently burn a piece of her own future. She is actively sacrificing the person she could have become to win the battle in the present. And in Japanese culture, the term Sakura is the ultimate symbol of fleeting beauty, mortality, and a life that is brilliant but short. So with all this combined, her title Flaming Sakura isn't about her forte, which involves ice, but it's how she is cutting her future short and burning it like flames for the sake of protecting those she loves. And that is Sakura, the ultimate symbol of beauty and a life that is gorgeous but short. Now let's talk about Hiyuki's involvement in the main story quest. First of all, she is not affected by the void matter, or at least she is incredibly resistant to it. She has traveled deep beneath the high-risk void matter zones like the one under Sandomir using her familiars. By familiars, it means these other versions of her, by the way. So she basically went into multiple high-risk void matter zones and still came out unharmed and unaffected. But the reason for her not being affected by the void might also be because she is using her familiars. It's not technically her actual physical form. If you have watched Hunter x Hunter, it kinda reminds me of this guy where he can send many puppet decoys from his Nen power, but whatever happens to those decoys doesn't physically hurt him, but he does lose his Nen for the duration these decoys are deployed. In this case, Nen is like the strength or chakra to keep your power going, and the wish granting power that she has with the help of Suzu, it seems like she can seal or temporarily defeat LF1 if it breaks out of the stride racket, which is kinda crazy. If she actually does that, I would be speechless cause LF1 is a cosmic level threat, and if it actually gets suppressed, it will mean a relic by a sentinel in the past is strong enough to hold such an alien-like entity we know nothing about. We know she has some connection with LF1 and it's obviously related to Ashinohara, and Honami is also somehow connected to void space, and it gets clearer the more we look at it. Now if there were multiple sentinels in Ashinohara, where did they go? Because Ashinohara is said to be largely destroyed now. Ashinohara's defense against the Trenodian was also built around Mikos. And isn't it weird how the strongest protector of Ashinohara is in Lahairoi investigating LF1? A rift opening inside the Sonorosphere of Honami City which leads to Lahairoi and void space for some people cannot be a coincidence. It does feel like Honami is inside void space as we speak. But yeah, LF1 has surely affected Ashinohara or its sentinel to a point that their strongest warrior has left their region and is fighting another country's problem. I think that's all I have to say for this video. I will make a video on Ashinohara later after playing through 3.3, but I'm really excited for the next patch, man. If you have watched the full video, thanks a lot for watching, and comment down if you have anything in the story that you are looking forward for. Yeah, see you guys later and thanks for watching. Boy.